our first guest, Rania Khalek, one of journalists and host of Dispatches on Breakthrough News. She can talk about almost anything. You wait and see. Rania, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Been some time since we last saw you. I want to talk to you about the Middle East, about Lebanon and so on. But if I may, I saw you commented on the Trump pardon for one of the world's biggest Latin American drug dealers, whilst at the same time saying he's about to invade Venezuela to stop drug dealing. You really couldn't make this up. It is the world's worst pretext for a war, isn't it?
It's truly incredible, George. It's good to see you too, and congrats on that Tucker bump. And yeah, this weekend was wild because we saw Donald Trump do two things. One, he pardoned what is essentially a former narco dictator of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was sentenced in a U.S. court last year for trafficking 400 tons of cocaine. That's a lot of drugs. And he pardoned him because it's a political ally of his. And this is happening as Trump is essentially interfering in Honduras presidential elections today, backing of court the far right personality who's running against the left. And this comes as Trump is also escalating, as you've been talking about, against Venezuela under the guise of fighting drug trafficking. And his administration has literally made up Venezuelan cartels to go after, to label as terrorist organizations, to try to justify this criminal targeting of people on fishing boats in the Caribbean. They've killed over 80 people so far, and they're threatening to overthrow Maduro based on lies. Literally just obvious lies. And what's amazing, George, is that they're not even bothering to really back up their lies, in the sense that the majority of the U.S. population doesn't even support this, including Trump's own base. They do not support him going into Venezuela. This is actually little Marco Rubio, who's in charge of pushing for this policy, and Stephen Miller. And it's amazing too, George, that it's coming from people who hate migrants so much, yet they're about to embark on a regime change war that, if they do go through with it, will be catastrophic and will cause a lot more migrants to come to the U.S., because you're talking about a country of 30 million people, Venezuela, and overthrowing the government there would completely destabilize it.
It is, you laugh or you cry with these things. It is laughable on one level, but you cry because it does look as if they are going to try and do this. The pretext is not even wafer thin, it's non-existent. But even if it was true, even if there were a lot of illegal drugs coming from Venezuela to the United States, which there is not, the obvious thing to do would be to talk to the Venezuelan government, act with and work with, assist the Venezuelan government in stopping this narco traffic. But of course, the narco is them. The money from the cartels is all in the banks of Florida. You mentioned little Marco Rubio. He lived in a house belonging to one of the big narco traffickers. The idea that Venezuela, this small socialist country and extremely patriotic country, is the source of America's drug problem is so patently absurd as to hardly even be worth discussing. But is anybody buying it in the United States? Is the media buying it, for example?
I would say only the pro-Trump media is just going along with whatever he says. So on Fox News and on Newsmax and all these various right-wing outlets, the Daily Wire, they'll be pushing this whole narco-terrorist label against Maduro. Whereas the entire corporate media, there's actually a split in the ruling class here, because they do recognize that this is based on absurdities. And while they obviously have no love, the corporate media in the U.S. has zero love for the Venezuelan government. They've long supported regime change efforts against Venezuela. they prefer to do it in a way that actually gets the support, I think, of the American public. And this is not it. I mean, at the end of the day, why is the US so antagonistic towards Venezuela? It's exactly what you said. Venezuela is a socialist country that embarked on a revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution under Chavez. They just want to control their own resources and use them to distribute subsidies to their people. Like you said, it is a very patriotic country. And of course, that's a huge threat to the US, which prefers to steal resources from the entire global South. So they've been trying to regime change Venezuela for a long time. But this is the first time you see this sort of drug label attempt to do it. And like you said, it's based on nothing. And, I know we're going to talk about the Middle East, George. I would say you cannot separate what's happening in places like Gaza and Lebanon and Syria from what's happening in Venezuela, because the genocide in Gaza and the ongoing aggression against Syria and Lebanon and the rest of the region by the Israelis and Americans has really raised the threshold of what's allowed when it comes to U.S. imperial aggression and cruelty and how far they're willing to go. I really don't think that you would see this wanton, murderous just targeting of fishermen in the Caribbean the way you have since August, killing over 82 people, had it not been for the horrors that we've seen live streamed for the last 2 years from Gaza and the rest of the region.
Now, the Pope is in Lebanon today. He's the only popular visitor I've seen coming from the West in Lebanon recently. You've had the U.S. envoy who doubles as the ambassador in Turkey, close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, insulting you all, believe this or not, demanding that you behave in a civilized manner. Let's start with Lebanon. The vultures are circling. How are the Lebanese people and government going to handle this very dangerous moment?
Well, dangerous is definitely the right word. Lebanon is in a horrible predicament right now because you have a government that is being pressured and is kind of aligned with the U.S. The U.S., since the ceasefire last year, has been trying to pressure the prime minister and the president of Lebanon to basically use the Lebanese army to disarm Hezbollah. And it's a very sensitive issue because that would actually cause a civil war-like confrontation in the country. And then you're also asking a country to disarm its only defensive force while it's facing a neighbor to the south, the Israelis, who want to steal their land and murder them. Since the ceasefire last year, there have been over 10,000 Israeli ceasefire violations against Lebanon. They've killed over 127 civilians in Lebanon. Since that time, they're occupying 5 areas of South Lebanon right now, and they bomb the country almost every single day at this point. They're not allowing any reconstruction in the south. They're even bombing reconstruction equipment, and they're promising to escalate further because even this U.S. allied administration that's in charge of Lebanon isn't good enough for the Israelis. The Israelis basically want to go in and just bomb and destroy, and they think they can disarm Hezbollah by doing that further across the country. So right now we're heading, ahead of the holidays. A lot of people visit Lebanon on the holidays, and everyone is really concerned right now that there might be a huge escalation. It's not just might, it's actually when. There's going to be an escalation by the Israelis. And right now you have an administration in the U.S., not that the past administration really had any red lines, but this one is, also giving Israel a blank check to do whatever they want. So Lebanon's in a very tough position, as are its neighbors in the region who have to deal with this horrific settler colonial aggressive neighbor.
As you know, I entered the Arab world for the first time through the portal of Lebanon in 1977. I lived in Beirut at that time. Lebanon has been bleeding, caused by Israel, basically all of my adult life. I mean, I was 23 when I first set foot in Beirut. I'm 71 now, and this has been one long bloody war. And the Lebanese resistance is literally the only defense that Lebanon has. It's been stabbed in the back many times by various actors in Beirut. What's the state of public opinion about this issue now?
I would say it's as polarized as it's always been. You have Hezbollah's base in the south. The Shia population of Lebanon is largely supportive of this force, that it's the only thing they can turn to defend themselves against a brutal occupier, because the government is incapable of doing so and refuses to do so. In fact, their government is trying to take away their ability to defend themselves in their villages. And then, the rest of the population of Lebanon, partly supportive of the resistance, partly not. There are those who are obviously, as is the case with a lot of countries in the global south, you have a portion of the country that is allied with the imperialists. And of course, they are working with the U.S. to try to weaken the resistance or ultimately get rid of it. And so that's why you have this very, very real fear of potential civil chaos if you actually do have the Lebanese army end up confronting Hezbollah to disarm them. They won't be able to disarm them, but it would cause a civil war-like scenario in Lebanon. And so that's another concern people have. So in addition to, Israeli bombs dropping from the sky and potential further Israeli invasion and theft of land, people also have to worry about a civil war on the ground with their own countrymen.
A civil war like the one in Syria, just across the border. All of the time that I described earlier, the fate of Syria and Lebanon has been intertwined. Now, do people not look across the border, see the massacres, the persecution, and see the daily increasing Israeli occupation and land theft going on in Syria, and say, hey, we don't want to go into that good night?
Absolutely. People are horrified by what's taken place in Syria since last year, with Ahmed al-Sharaa taking over as president, formerly known as Mohammed al-Jalani, leader of the al-Qaeda branch in Syria, formerly a member of ISIS. Now the president of this country and his forces, his HTS forces, who occupy the intelligence agencies, and now, the high-ranking members of his military forces, have been going around the country and slaughtering minorities. And also have been threatening to come into Lebanon and do the same there. So many people in Lebanon are even more frightened with the prospect of disarming Hezbollah at a time, we remember back in the ISIS al-Qaeda days not too long ago, Hezbollah was crucial to preventing their takeover of areas of Lebanon and to preventing massacres of minorities across Lebanon when they had taken over large swaths of Iraq and Syria. And I'm glad you mentioned Syria, because at the same time as you have this new government in Syria that's trying so hard to be best friends with the Israelis, they want so badly to normalize, you also have the Israelis saying, no, thank you. They've bombed Syria since last year over 1,000 times. Over 1,000 times. They're currently occupying something like 9 areas of Syria. The Israelis go in and they disappear Syrians. Just this weekend, I'm sure you saw, George, the Israelis did a raid in the southern part of Syria that's considered the countryside of Damascus, and they killed 13 people. They went into Syria to arrest people, and they killed 13 people, including 2 children. And then there was a firefight. Some Israeli soldiers got injured, and of course they call that terrorism, because any resistance to Israel is considered terrorism. And what has the Syrian government under Ahmed al-Sharaa done? Nothing except for complain a little bit at the UN. That's it. They're not defending their people. They've let the Israelis destroy all of their military infrastructure, and they're just begging and pleading to please normalize with the Israelis. It's such a huge portrayal of not just the Palestinian cause, but the cause of sovereignty across the region.
Speaking of murdered children, Israel murdered another 2 children, at least 2, in Gaza today. The rest of the world thinks there's a ceasefire in Gaza, but there isn't, is there?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. In Gaza, there have already been, since the October 10th ceasefire, and I put ceasefire in big quotes, George, since that supposed ceasefire went into place, Israel has violated it over 500 times. And as you said, and they've killed over 350 civilians at this point. And as you said, just this weekend, they killed 2 small children. And why did they kill those children? They accused them of crossing into the yellow line. This is a line that Israel has created that occupies about 58% of Gaza. The line moves all the time, so nobody really knows where it is. And it's just to prevent Palestinians from returning into their homes in Gaza that they were displaced from. And so Israel can steal more land and concentrate them into smaller and smaller areas of the Strip. This genocide is absolutely ongoing. And, I know people have been hearing this for over 2 years, and it's probably sounding a little bit old, and maybe people are it's become normalized. This genocide in Gaza has become so normalized. It's over 100,000 deaths, right? It's like hard to pay attention or focus on the small details anymore, George. But I just want to say that what's happening in Gaza is important to the entire world, not just because from like a moral standpoint that we should oppose genocide, but this war is coming home. And what I mean by that is that support for Israel has plummeted to a historic low in just the US. I mean, I'm sure even in the UK, it's the same. And so the Israelis, they can't really, they basically, for the temporary period, they're in a winning position across the region. They've weakened the resistance. They're kind of in greater Israel times and taking over more land. But now their new war is with public opinion in the West, because they can't function as a settler colony without ongoing unconditional support from the Western countries. And those are, kind of bourgeoisie democracies where you do need some public support to continue giving Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, while the rest of us in these Western countries, can't access healthcare and, are having trouble affording grocery bills. But all that's to say, the Israelis are now turning to the Western countries to work with administrations like Donald Trump to try to take away our democratic rights to protest. And so this is about you and your rights if you're living in the UK or the US or anywhere across the Western world right now, because the Israelis are spending a huge amount of money to collaborate with extremely undemocratic forces in these countries to take away our right to free speech and our right to protest. I mean, look what's happening to Palestine Action in the UK. So all that's to say, what happens in Gaza doesn't stay there. So we need to keep focusing on what's happening in Gaza, keep protesting it, keep opposing it, and pay attention to what the Israelis are doing propagandistically in our own countries, consolidating control over media and really trying to come after our basic rights.
The audience is demanding more of you, but the hour precludes it. How can people follow your work, Rania?
Well, I appreciate that, George, and I appreciate you. People can follow my work by following Breakthrough News, where I host a show, as you said, called Dispatches. We're on all social media platforms. Go subscribe to us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're there covering all these stories as much as possible. Independent media, more important than ever.